One moonlit night in medieval Ireland, a lone priest traveling through the woods of Ossory was confronted by a chilling sight. From the darkness emerged a great wolf, but instead of attacking, the beast spoke with a human voice. The wolf pleaded for the priest's help, begging him to give last rites to its dying mate. This was no ordinary fairy tale or fireside legend. According to a 12th century chronicler, this encounter really happened in the wilds of Ossory. The tale of the werewolves of Ossory, humans cursed to live as wolves for years at a time, has become a key part of Irish lore and continues to fascinate historians and folklorists alike. What were these werewolves, and why did medieval writers take their story so seriously? In the Topographia Hibernica, written around 1188, the Norman Welsh cleric Gerald of Wales recorded one of the most famous accounts of the Ossory werewolves. Gerald tells of an unnamed priest who was journeying through Ossory, a medieval Irish kingdom roughly in today's County Kilkenny, when he encountered an astonishing creature. A large wolf approached the priest's campfire. To the priest's utter amazement, the wolf began to speak, imploring him not to be afraid. The frightened priest demanded to know what sort of wolf this was, and the creature proceeded to explain its tragic story, as was the style for Irish werewolves at the time. According to Gerald's account, the wolf revealed that he and his wife were in fact natives of Ossory who labored under a powerful curse. Long ago, Saint Natalis, a local abbot, had punished their people for an unspecified sin. As a result, a man and a woman from Ossory were condemned to transform into wolves every 7 years, banished to the woods in wolfish form. If they survived the full 7-year term, they would regain their human shape and return home. But there was a catch. Another man and woman would then take their place under the curse for the next 7 years. The talking wolf before the priest was one such accursed man, and his ailing wolf companion was actually his wife. Now she lay dying, and despite wearing the body of a wolf, she still had the soul of a human. The wolf implored the priest to give his wife the last rites of the church so that her soul would not be lost. Faced with this implausible request, the priest was understandably hesitant. To reassure him, the male wolf drew back the fur from his female companion's body, revealing the form of an elderly human woman beneath the wolfskin. Seeing this disturbing display, the priest's doubts vanished, and he accepted that the creature laying before him was in some sort of flux between wolf and human form. He performed the communion for the dying and prayed over the she-wolf, granting her the comfort of the sacraments. The male wolf remained by their side, speaking and responding with pious devotion throughout the ritual. After the she-wolf received her rites, the male wolf escorted the priest safely out of the woods. Before they parted, the wolf delivered a prophecy about the political future of Ireland and its recent Norman invaders, speaking with an almost otherworldly insight. News of this encounter soon spread, and Gerald writes that the priest later reported the incident to the local bishop, and a church synod was convened to investigate the matter. On Gerald's advice, the priest was even sent on a journey to present his story to the Pope in Rome. In other words, the medieval church took the Ossory werewolves seriously enough to seek judgment from the Holy See. Gerald of Wales's narrative is dramatic and eerie, but it is not an isolated folk tale. It sits at the crossroads of medieval religion, folklore, and colonial politics. A number of unique features make the Ossory werewolves stand out from typical werewolf lore. For one, these werewolves talk and are far from being mindless beasts. They speak rationally about God, ask for sacraments, and deliver prophetic statements. In fact, they're very well-mannered and keep their word as well, behaving better than many non-werewolf humans would. Despite being in wolf form, they aren't the usual wild beings of werewolf folklore. They're victims of a hereditary curse and remain fundamentally human in spirit despite their lupine bodies. The story portrays them sympathetically, as cursed souls seeking redemption rather than monstrous villains. The question on most people's minds after hearing about these werewolves is straightforward. What gave rise to such an unusual legend? Modern researchers have shown that the werewolves of Ossory were not a product of Gerald's imagination alone, but part of a much older Irish tradition. The idea of humans turning into wolves appears in multiple medieval Irish sources, and intriguingly, it often points back to Ossory. As early as the 11th century, an Irish cleric named Patrick, Bishop of Dublin, wrote a Latin poem that mentions a clan of shapeshifters. According to this poem, these people acquired this power from birth, rather than a demonic pact. While transformed, these people would stalk the forests, slaughtering sheep like real wolves, yet their human bodies remained elsewhere in a trance. The poem describes how any wounds inflicted on the wolf form would mysteriously appear on the person's human body, as if the two forms were still connected. Family and friends were warned never to disturb the inert human body during the magical transformation, or else the roaming soul might not find its way back. Notably, the poem explicitly ties this wonder to ancestry. It was an inherited nature, which parallels the Ossory tale of a curse passed down through generations. The kingdom of Ossory itself had long-standing wolf associations. In medieval Irish genealogy, the kings of Ossory claimed descent from a legendary figure named Leanech Faelad, whose nickname literally means wolf-like or wolf-man. According to this, the Ossory kings and their descendants supposedly carried the power, or curse, of transforming into wolves. Such an origin myth might have been a point of fierce pride or dread, implying that the Osorians had a wild, otherworldly ancestry distinct from other Irish clans. Scholars believe these legends were heavily influenced by the culture of ancient Irish warriors. In medieval Irish literature, warriors and outlaws were often compared to wolves for their ferocity and wilderness lifestyle. Bands of young warriors lived in forests, surviving as hunters, and were sometimes described as taking on wolf-like characteristics. Further, there are accounts of Irish fighters wearing wolf skins or adopting wolf-inspired hairstyles as they went into battle or raids. Importantly, by the Middle Ages, bears were likely extinct in Ireland, and wolves, along with boars, fit neatly into the role of apex predators on the island. It makes sense that groups of young warriors and bandits would come to see themselves as a wolf pack living at the edge of society. These historical realities could easily seed tales of literal shape-shifting. A ruthless warrior donned in a wolf pelt might be imagined to actually become a wolf in the heat of combat. Over time, such stories could grow into the full-blown legend of a tribe of werewolves inhabiting Ossory. This in turn could lead to a genealogy where the kings of Ossory are descended from a clan of werewolves. In turn, over time, this legend could have further morphed into the tale told by Gerald of Wales. In other words, the Ossory werewolves legend may preserve echoes of a very real practice. From these ancient Irish wolf warriors, whose appearance and behavior blurred the line between man and beast, we may have gotten a bizarre tale of a Christian werewolf needing final rites. As the consensus now stands, the werewolves of Ossory are more than the bizarre medieval tale they're generally portrayed as. The mystery, somewhat surprisingly, appears to be fully grounded in real medieval Irish history, with layers of religious overtones added on top of it. That said, the actual event involving the priest meeting the two werewolves remains poorly understood. However, the leading theory is that it may have been a metaphorical tale, which had its meaning rendered quite literal over time. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here. Just reminding you to click like and subscribe and to share this video around. Also, remember to check out the YouTube membership or the Patreon if you want to support my channel and my work further. It was a serene Sunday in medieval Ireland. The congregation at the monastery of Clonmacnoise had gathered for Mass, unaware that they were about to witness something extraordinary. As the service ended and people filtered out of the church, they looked up and gasped. High above them, a wooden ship was seemingly sailing through the air. The villagers stood in astonishment as the airborne vessel drifted overhead. Then, with a sudden jolt, an anchor attached to a rope plummeted from the skyship and caught fast on the wooden arch of the church door. The people rushed forward to examine this uncanny object from the heavens. Moments later, one of the ship's crew climbed down the rope, moving as though swimming through water. He struggled to free the anchor from the church door, while the onlookers watched in disbelief. Some bystanders grabbed hold of the visitor, perhaps hoping to capture a being from the sky. The Bishop of Clonmacnoise, however, intervened. He realized the sailor was drowning in air, choking as if submerged in water. The bishop shouted for the crowd to release the man. As soon as they let go, the sky sailor caught his breath, swam back up the rope to his ship, and the vessel sailed away into the clouds. The anchor, now loosed, was left behind as evidence of this fleeting encounter between earth and sky. This is no modern tale. It's a legendary anecdote recorded in medieval chronicles, known today as the airship of Clonmacnoise. For over 1,000 years, this story has captivated imaginations, from monks and medieval scholars to modern historians and UFO enthusiasts. What exactly did the people of 8th century Ireland see that day, and how has this mystery in the sky been interpreted over time? To answer those questions, we must journey back to the early Middle Ages, when Irish scribes first noted the astonishing sight of ships sailing overhead. Clonmacnoise was a thriving monastic city in early medieval Ireland. Founded in the mid-6th century, it grew into a renowned center of faith and learning on the banks of the River Shannon. Dozens of stone churches, round towers, and carved crosses dotted its grounds, attracting monks and pilgrims from across Ireland. It's against this real and well-documented historical backdrop that our skyship story unfolds. The earliest record of something strange in the skies over Ireland comes from the Irish annals in the 8th century. Multiple annalists, medieval scribes who kept yearly chronicles of events, noted a remarkable occurrence around the year 743 AD. The Annals of Ulster, for example, report concisely that ships with their crews were seen in the air over Ireland. Similar brief entries appear in the Annals of Tigernach, the Annals of Clonmacnoise, and others, all referring to what seems to be the same event. Clearly, something about this sighting made medieval observers feel it was noteworthy enough to record alongside kings' battles and natural disasters. We can imagine the mixture of fear and wonder such a sight might have inspired. To these chroniclers, the sky itself appeared to be hosting ghostly ships. Naturally, the annals give no details beyond the bare fact of the apparition, since annals, by their nature, are brief and matter-of-fact reports, not narrative accounts. Think of them as X happened in year Y, with no further analysis. As the story of aerial ships was retold over the centuries, it did not remain a one-line entry in dusty annals. Medieval storytellers and monks expanded and embellished the account, adding colorful details that transformed the mystery into a rich legend. One early elaboration appears in the Book of Leinster, a 12th century manuscript, which situates the event during a great fair at Telltown in County Meath. According to this version, while the men of Ireland gathered for a festival in the 8th century, they looked up and saw 3 ships voyaging through the air above them. This time, The story offers more than just a sighting. It describes an interaction. One of the sky ship's crewmen cast a fishing spear down from the ship at a salmon swimming far below in Ireland's waters. He struck the fish, and the salmon dropped out of the sky onto the ground amid the astonished festival goers. Determined to retrieve his catch, a sailor from the airborne ship swam down through the air to reach the ground. The crowd swarmed around as this otherworldly fisherman retrieved the fallen salmon. One man on the ground grabbed at the man out of curiosity, only to have the strange visitor cry out that he was drowning. In that moment, the people realized that what was mere air to them was experienced as water by the sky sailor. In the Book of Leinster's tale, a local king wisely ordered the onlookers to release the visitor and let him swim back up to his ship, which they did. The skyman returned to his floating vessel, disappearing into the heavens with his salmon, and the assembly below was left marveling at what they had witnessed. Over time, the legend continued to evolve in monastic lore, and while the story stayed broadly the same, it was made more engaging and compelling. The number of ships was whittled down from 3 to 1 singular ship, and the setting shifted to the hallowed ground of Clonmacnoise Abbey itself. An influential version of the story appears in a Middle Irish text, perhaps composed by the 12th century, preserved in a later manuscript now in Edinburgh. In this telling, the fantastic encounter takes place at the church of Clonmacnoise on a Sunday. As people attended Mass, a lone ship sailed overhead and dropped an anchor down from the sky. The anchor's fluke snagged onto the doorway of the church, preventing the ship from moving on. The congregation, pouring outside, grabbed hold of the anchor chain, perhaps trying to prevent the mysterious ship from escaping. Soon, a sailor from the sky ship dove overboard and swam down through the air toward the ground. There he reached the church door, straining to unhook the anchor caught on it. Down below, the clergy and onlookers seized the opportunity. They grabbed the anchor and possibly the descending sailor himself, but the Bishop of Clonmacnoise urgently warned them to let the man go, fearing that they'd drown him in the water-like air. The people heeded the bishop's command and released the visitor. The sky sailor, now free, managed to dislodge his anchor and clambered back up the rope to rejoin his ship. The crew cut the rope, leaving the anchor behind, and the ship then sailed away out of sight. In this account, the anchor left behind at Clonmacnoise became a prized relic on display, a tangible proof that this otherworldly incident had occurred. Through such retellings, the airship legend gained vivid detail and a sense of place. What began as a vague note of ships in the air grew into a full narrative with dialogue, named locations, and even moral insight. In both these fleshed-out versions, an authority figure wisely notices that the man will perish if kept on the ground and orders him let go. Notably, the story also encapsulated a striking idea that the laws of nature could invert between the world of the sky people and our own. To those on the ground, air is light and breathable, while water is heavy and suffocating. But for the visitors from the sky ocean, it seemed, the reverse was true. This theme of inversion gave the tale a thought-provoking twist that likely helped it spread far beyond its Irish origins. Medieval Europe had a voracious appetite for marvels and miracle stories, and the airship didn't remain an exclusively Irish wonder. As the tale of the skyship circulated, writers in other countries adapted it to their own locales. One of the earliest non-Irish references comes from a French chronicle. The chronicler wrote that in the year 1122, a ship's anchor dropped from the sky and snagged in a churchyard in London, England. In this version of events, the locals supposedly found a rope attached to the anchor, leading up into the clouds. They initially tried to Jack and the Beanstalk their way up to the top to the sky world, but gave up after minimal efforts. They then waited around, and after some time a sailor descended the rope. This person was unable to free the anchor before the curious crowd gathered around him and helped him out, eventually allowing him to rejoin his crew in the sky. Unlike the subsequent story, though, this is an all's well that ends well story of a community coming together to help out a visitor from the sky. In one dramatic account by the English historian Gervase of Tilbury, the unfortunate sky sailor who came down was actually grabbed by the onlookers. In this version, the otherworldly figure ended up perishing in the dense air, and the ship above, after waiting in vain for its crewman's return, finally cut the rope and sailed away. In this version, once again, they left the anchor behind as a souvenir of the event. Gervase, writing around 1211 in his Otia Imperialia, even noted that the church door of that village was later fitted with ironwork made from the mysterious anchor's metal. I should mention that Gervase of Tilbury was in the service of Holy Roman Emperor Otto IV, who was the grandson of Henry II of England. This book was specifically written for the entertainment of the emperor and included everything from contemporary folklore to ancient legends to cutting-edge 13th century science. Given that Gervase of Tilbury included this story in his compilation, with added flourishes, it's believed that the legend was widely known in English clerical circles at the time. By the mid-13th century, the legend had made its way back into Irish circles in a polished form. A Norwegian text known as the King's Mirror, written around 1250, includes a section on strange marvels of Ireland, wherein it retells the Clon MacNoise incident. This was intended to be a text that would be read and understood by Norwegian rulers and included events considered particularly important to governance. In this version, the bishop is given the starring role when he bravely commands the unruly mob to release the sky sailor. It's believed that the action of the bishop was supposed to be a moral instruction to future Norwegian kings. From Ireland to Britain to Scandinavia, the story of a ship cruising the heavens and dropping its anchor had become part of the medieval repertoire of the marvelous. The airship legend didn't fade after the Middle Ages either. It continued to surface in various forms in later centuries. In the 19th century, for instance, scholars and folklorists rediscovered the tale in old manuscripts and published it for contemporary readers. It even made a curious reappearance in 1897 during the great wave of mystery airship sightings in the United States. In April of that year, a newspaper in Texas reported that local churchgoers saw a brilliant airship with lights in the sky, dragging a rope and anchor along the ground. The story goes that the anchor snagged on a railroad track, and a humanoid figure slid down the rope, cut it free, and flew off into the darkness with the airborne craft. The abandoned anchor was, allegedly, later displayed in the town's blacksmith shop. This Texas tale was almost certainly a journalistic hoax to sell papers. However, its details are so similar to the medieval legend that there's little doubt someone was consciously borrowing from the old Irish historical mystery. This legend is so intriguing that it's managed to attract both significant popular attention as well as scholarly attention as well. Modern scholars have approached this mystery from multiple angles, seeking either a rational explanation for the original report or a deeper understanding of its mythic meaning. But first, we really need to consider the medieval European mindset, since that makes the viral nature of this tale much more sensible. In the early medieval worldview, the sky was not an empty void, but a realm that could contain its own oceans and lands. The Bible itself mentions waters above the firmament in Genesis, and this led to centuries of debate about what lay above the clouds in the heavens. Some medieval scholars thought the upper waters were a literal ocean in the heavens. Gervase of Tilbury, for example, firmly believed that a real sea existed above the sky. In such a context, the notion of ships sailing on an upper sea was not utterly implausible to a medieval audience. The airship legend may have been received not as a report of alien invaders, but as a wondrous affirmation that the natural order contained marvels beyond ordinary comprehension. Notably, Celtic folklore often featured inversions of reality and journeys between worlds. In fact, Irish legend has other examples of the sea and land swapping places. One saint's story describes two holy men meeting on the ocean, one walking on water because to him it appears as a flowery meadow, while the other sails a boat because he sees it as water. Each perceives the world differently until they share their perspectives, and only when they meet are the two perspectives that overlay the exact same world mutually intelligible. The airship of Clonmacnoise carries a similar theme. In this context, these airship stories suggest that not only is an inversion of the natural order possible, but that each reality is valid in its own frame of reference. Other attempts to explain what the airship sighting was focus on the bare bones of the original chronicle reference. One candidate is an atmospheric optical illusion, more specifically, a kind of mirage. There is a known phenomenon called a fata morgana, where light bending through layers of air can project a distant scene above the horizon. This sometimes makes ships appear as if they're floating in the sky. This usually occurs over large bodies of water or ice on the horizon. If observers in early medieval Ireland saw a distant ship refracted into the sky, they might indeed describe it as ships in the air. Meanwhile, outside academic circles, the airship of Clonmacnoise has drawn attention from the UFO and paranormal community. Many ufologists point to it as evidence of an early alien visitation or UFO sighting, interpreting the ship and its crew literally as extraterrestrials described in medieval terms. Indeed, lists of historical UFO encounters often include the 743 AD airborne ships over Ireland as a precursor to later sightings. Interestingly, some Irish folklorists have offered another interpretation, not aliens, but fairies. In Irish mythology, the boundary between the fairy realm and our own was thin, and stories abound of fantastical aerial occurrences involving fairy folk. In one legend from another part of Ireland, a host of fairies was seen battling in the skies above. Ultimately, with the scant evidence available, no one can say for certain what inspired the airship story. Modern science leans toward atmospheric optics as the root, while cultural scholars emphasize the narrative's role as a teaching tale or symbolic myth. There is also the possibility that the original chronicler's report was simply metaphorical language, perhaps describing an omen or vision rather than a concrete event. Without a time machine to visit 8th century Ireland, we have to rely on inference. What we can be sure of is that the story struck a chord and endured because it was rich with meaning. Perhaps the mystery of the event also led to the story being repeated more over the generations, since everyone who hears the tale has their own take on what it could have been. The Lost Dutchman's gold mine is said to be a massive cache of gold hidden in Arizona's Superstition Mountains. This is a treasure trove so rich, it's rumored to be valued at over $200 million. According to legend, this secret mine was rediscovered in the 19th century by Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant known as the Dutchman. The lore indicates this German-American prospector took its location to his grave in 1891. Over the past century, the story of the Lost Dutchman has captivated countless treasure hunters and become perhaps the most famous lost mine legend in American history. Each year, hopeful prospectors venture into these rugged peaks searching for Waltz's elusive gold, guided by cryptic clues that may be more legend than reality. None have ever found a trace of the treasure, at least not publicly, and some have paid with their lives while pursuing it. Numerous disturbing and well-documented deaths have been associated with the hunt for the treasure well into the 20th century. One origin story for the Lost Dutchman legend begins with the Peralta family, wealthy Mexican landowners who controlled the mountains in the region. In the 1840s, the Peraltas reportedly developed a rich gold mine in the Superstition Mountains and extracted a fortune in ore. What happened next varies depending on the telling, but every version revolves around this Mexican family. In one version, in 1848, the mining operation was supposedly ambushed by Apache warriors, leaving virtually everyone who knew the location of it deceased. In another version, the Apache warriors attacked the Peralta family directly, wiping them out specifically not due to the mine, but due to a territorial dispute. In this version of the story, the Peraltas were all slain, except for one member of the family who eventually told Jacob Waltz the family secret. It remains unclear if the Peralta family ever actually had a claim in the Superstition Range, or if this tale was grafted onto the legend years later. That said, historians do note that there was a documented wealthy Mexican cattle ranching family named De Peralta, who controlled territory in the region. Later treasure hunters found a set of carved rock maps known as the Peralta Stones. The Peralta Stones, which I've put up on the screen if you just listen, have been taken by some theorists to be proof positive of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. These stones are supposedly a map that was used by Jacob Waltz to find the gold mine. The Peralta stones themselves are their own mystery, but some researchers believe them to be legitimate while others believe the stones are 20th century forgeries. But let's get to the legend's most pivotal figure, Jacob Waltz, the Lost Dutchman himself. Waltz was a German immigrant who arrived in Arizona in the mid-19th century to prospect for gold. By way of programming note, the nickname comes from the old term used by Americans for Germans at the time, and has nothing to do with the Dutch. According to the lore, Waltz discovered the hidden mine in the 1870s with the help of a Peralta descendant and worked it with a partner, Jacob Weiser. The two men periodically emerged from the mountains with saddlebags laden heavy with gold ore, but, as one may expect given the time, they never revealed where it came from. Weiser eventually vanished. Some said Apaches had ended him, others suspected Waltz had a hand in it. And Waltz grew secretive about the mine, and generally reclusive. In October 1891, an elderly and ailing Waltz lay on his deathbed in Phoenix, and gave his caretaker, Julia Thomas, enigmatic directions to the mine's location. Julia and others who followed Waltz's hints never managed to find the treasure, but they did recover a significant amount of gold hidden under Waltz's bed. Some have taken this as tangible proof that something was there, while others point out that Waltz was a well-known prospector regardless. For generations since the death of the Dutchman, treasure hunters have sought to grab a hold of his glistening booty. Many searchers focus around Weaver's Needle, a jagged 1,000-foot spire in the Superstitions, which appears in most versions of Waltz's tale as a key landmark near the hidden mine. Explanations for why the mine has never been found, if it ever existed at all, are quite mundane. Some historians argue there was never a rich mine at all. Under this theory, they suggest Waltz either stole his ore from other mines or found a one-time cache, meaning no mother lode remains to be discovered. If he stole it, he may have simply made up the story to explain why he had significant wealth that otherwise couldn't be accounted for. Others speculate that Waltz and Weiser may have been even more sinister figures, who may have slain other prospectors and again used an ill-defined mine as a cover story. Virtually nothing is known about why these men left Germany, or their history outside the mine, leading some to speculate that they had criminal histories. That said, This is pure speculation, with no evidence whatsoever to support it. Others theorize the entrance may now be sealed or even submerged. One theory suggests the Dutchman's gold could lie under Apache Lake, an artificial lake formed by the Horse Mesa Dam. If this is the case, this would make any attempts by amateur treasure hunters to find the gold mine entirely futile. Importantly, this dam was established in the 1920s, well before the story had acquired the legendary status it currently has. It's possible then that by the time treasure hunters arrived, the gold was already long buried. Every few years, a new purported clue or decoding of an old cipher makes headlines, but each supposed discovery inevitably ends in disappointment. To date, no one has definitively confirmed the location of Jacob Waltz's mine, and its whereabouts remain an enduring mystery. Perhaps just as interesting as the gold itself is the history of the search and the dangers faced by those who have sought the Dutchman's gold. Sheer cliffs, maze-like canyons, and iron-rich rocks skew compasses and make navigation perilous. Summer temperatures in the Arizona desert regularly soar above 110 degrees Fahrenheit, while sudden storms in cooler months can bring flash floods or hypothermia-inducing cold. Water is scarce in this rugged wilderness, and cell phones often have no signal. Notably, Dutchman treasure seekers often go in unprepared, carrying too little water, wearing the wrong gear, and underestimating the terrain, mistakes that can be fatal. Some have speculated that this is because many of the people who seek the treasure aren't experienced hikers, just amateurs who've caught the treasure hunting bug. Further, many of these individuals come from parts of the country that are much more hospitable in terms of climate. For instance, getting off course for a couple hours on a hike in the Great Smokies isn't good, but generally isn't fatal. The same can't be said for an unintended detour through the Arizona desert, where a poorly provisioned hiker can die of exposure rapidly. In addition to natural hazards, the search for the lost Dutchman has a bloody history of violence, suggesting that at some point someone may have been guarding something in the area. In 1931, an amateur explorer vanished while hunting for the mine. 6 months later, his skull was found in a remote canyon with 2 holes identified as bullet wounds, and his gruesome fate made national headlines. Some speculated at the time that this explorer may have gotten a bit too close to the truth. In 1945, an author named Barry Storm claimed he narrowly escaped a sniper's bullet in the Superstitions. He speculated that this phantom shooter might have also slain the previous explorer to guard the mine's secrets. Notably, at the time, this story was treated as a sensationalistic tale designed to drum up interest in a book. Subsequent events would prove that this likely wasn't the case, and that Storm was likely actually shot at. In 1947, prospector James Cravey chartered a helicopter into the mountains to search for the treasure, believing that he had cracked the case. Several months later, his headless remains were found out in the wilderness. Throughout the 50s and 60s, several other treasure hunters were found dead in the wild. They had all been shot. Others simply never returned home, with no signs of their bodies ever found. The hunt for the mine continues to claim lives into the 21st century, with the last known treasure hunters having perished from exposure in 2010 while on the trail of the gold. After more than a century of intrigue, the truth behind the lost Dutchman's gold mine mystery remains unsolved. No expedition has ever conclusively proven the mine's existence, yet the legend endures as one of the epic tales of the Old West.